Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Saving a Craft Load of Money. That is our theme this year. It continues to be the theme. How do we get better at what we do in the craft community? And I really appreciate Jassa from Frigid.Cloud. Thank you for joining me. This is great to get a chance to talk a little bit more with you and about your organization. So maybe we kick things off. You could tell us a little bit more about Frigid.Cloud, and then we'll dive into some of the questions.
Sure. No, thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be here. So Frigid.Cloud, we're a automation platform that allows breweries to increase their operational efficiencies while using less energy. So we're temperature automation essentially. So automate how your chiller temperatures integrate with what your tanks are trying to do, and to use less energy, but also allow you to get some time back and reclaim potentially after hours and weekends and things like that, by giving you peace of mind. So what I mean by that is our platform gives you remote access and control of your ferments and your chiller through your phone or your laptop, and the way that we can automate cooling changes around your recipes and temperature profiles. It means that you don't have to sort of set up and forget things a little bit, let them run, let the system update you when it's doing things, so that you can concentrate on other parts of the brewery, which is, when you're not having to worry about what something's doing on the weekend, or if you are worried about it, you can always bring up your phone and have a look. It's a nice peace of mind, and mitigate some risk, I guess, from things getting away from you. Because when something goes wrong, it always happens on a Friday night, so you find out about it on Monday morning. It's the law of law of that. So yeah, that's operationally how we look to buy back time for brewers. And then on the energy side, the algorithms we have for cooling, and we have a few different concepts, mainly pulse cooling, which is instead of continuously flowing glycol to tanks, we have a pulsing algorithm that locks, holds, and maximizes heat transfer, which is more efficient for your glycol chiller, and also allows you to sort of target tanks specifically for cooling. And then we also have some algorithms that work around your energy tariffs, or if you have renewable energy, it works around when you're generating energy, to ensure that you're maximizing that and then using less energy when it's more expensive. And so the way that works is we integrate our platform with your chiller to give it context for what your tanks are trying to achieve, and it knowing what your tanks are trying to do, it can work a lot more efficiently and smarter than just running cold all the time in case the tank at some point needs some glycol.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. So we hook it into your existing infrastructure. So there's no big, it's not a huge hardware upgrade or anything. We use generally as much as we can of what you already have. So the sensors you already have for temperature, the solenoids you already have for controlling glycol flow, and we hook them into our cloud panel, and then you're away.
That is great. I appreciate the overview. My questions, I immediately went two directions. So I'm going to start with column A on here is trends that you're seeing. And so when you talk about some of the value add from either a cost, energy savings, sustainability, time, what are some of the trends you're seeing from breweries specifically? And my biggest question is, are they aware of your platform out there? Are you getting people are saying, this is something I've been thinking about or wish was out there, and it turns out it is? Or are you having to go out and tell them this is some of this technology that's coming into the industry that wasn't there 4 or 5 years ago? So talking trends just a little bit about a lot there, but from anything from sustainability, energy, or just awareness from your
I think
standpoint.
the awareness one is really interesting, because definitely, I mean, the spiel I just did, even then, like, it is kind of hard to get your head around those two concepts in a platform. And our first question when we go to breweries is, what are you spending on energy, or like kilowatt per hour? And
Mhm.
specifically, how much energy does your chiller use? And 90% of the time, people have no idea. I
Yeah.
mean, they'll know they're paying either, they'll definitely say they're paying a lot for energy, but they can't really break it down past that point. So one of the things that we're is trends we're seeing are people are obviously rising costs across the board with everything, but people paying a little bit more attention now to what can we change so that we can't increase the cost of our product to our consumer at the rate that the input costs are going up for us. I've got to try and find margin cuts in there, right? But one of the things that on the awareness side is well, I encourage people to try and sub-meter their chiller so they can understand how much energy it's actually using, because the research we've done and what we've also read from third parties is it's anywhere between 50 and 75% of your energy costs is down to your chiller, depending on what you have at your brewery. If you've got a big restaurant or something else, obviously that's going to change. But yeah, it's generally between 50 and 75. So that's quite a big part of your energy bill just on cooling. So yeah, the other part of it is if your chiller's running okay and it's keeping things cold, if something's working, you don't touch it, right? So
Yeah.
I think people are. That's the other thing. If it's running okay, then they just put up with the cost of it, and are a little bit, I guess, blissfully ignorant to potentially the cost that it is having on the business.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one for me is just the awareness on what your rates are, when the expensive times are, and how much energy your chiller is actually using.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and that gets into, one of the things I talk to a lot of people these days is about challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And challenges in the industry. But you touched on, I think, a big one of where at least when there's an awareness of we have a problem with our canning line doesn't work that great.
Mm-hmm.
This piece of equipment doesn't work that great. Or we need to replace XYZ. There's all these like unknown element. But I can only imagine when you ask someone that utility question, just a shrug of the shoulders, right?
Yeah,
It is what it is. It's painful to write that check or to send that payment, but I
yeah,
don't feel that I can
just put up with it. Mm-hmm.
impact
Mm-hmm.
that. So I imagine
I,
that
I think as well, especially with chillers, it's only a problem when it's a problem, if that makes sense. So if it trips out or gets really hot or for whatever reason, then there's a problem with the chiller. But when it's running, even it might be running, those problems could have been prevented potentially. Um, and also, I think the immediate thing is, it's it needs replacing or it's undersized or A, B, or C. But each of those things can be addressed. I mean, you and I were talking before this session about how to operate your brewery more efficiently, and I think this is the more you know about how it operates, like that's the starting point. You need to know what you're already doing to understand what you could be doing better, or even to start doing the research yourself on how you could be doing things better.
yeah.
Because there's always a nature of this industry. There's always going to be things that pop up day to day that require attention. But the more that you can kind of have those things prevent those things from happening, then obviously that's going to pay off.
Yeah, you said about that, where something's happening, the challenge of knowing where to, direct that, where to start. I feel like a lot of times what I hear from brewers though is there's a million things I'm trying to do this week. And so the problem sometimes, like looking under the rock and seeing all this, thing is if all
Yeah.
you see are a series of problems, that's where they're like, we were talking a little bit about, the big conference coming up in the
Mhm.
US for CBC. One of the things I challenge brewers to talk at a lot of booths is to walk up and say, tell me something you do for a brewery that I might not know, where it's like, how do you help other breweries operate? Because I feel like that conversation is so much more about like we've looked under the rock, we've found something, and this is how we're fixing it. It's not just a problem, it's a
Mhm.
problem with the steps and a solution. Because I think that's a big thing that they need help with is, okay, you've told me my chiller is part of my large cost center. It's costing me a lot of
Mhm.
money, but I need it for making beer. Like what can you do to kind of, and then to walk them through that. And
For
I
sure.
guess one of the things too, and so you have that ability to say this is something we could do. How does that match up sometimes when you have talked to a brewery who says, we love to be sustainable, we want to be sustainable, but they feel like to be sustainable always costs more, right? Where there,
Hmm.
it feels sometimes, just my take sometimes is that, if you're giving up an either or, like, well, to be sustainable, you've just got to pay 2 or 3x. And is that something you have to educate or talk to
I,
and start to
I
have, when you
definitely,
talk
yeah,
about being sustainable and saving money, it sometimes sounds like a contradiction.
it does, and that is something you come up against a lot. And I think, yeah, there's definitely a mindset of for me to achieve that sustainability or reduce my carbon output. I need to spend money or put in big upgrades. But I think it really just starts with a mindset shift. So just like there's little things that you could do across the board that just put you in that mindset of saving energy, because it's always going to be like, sure, you can go out and get spend money on like CO2 recapture or something that's going to have a big impact straight away, but there's lots of little things you could also do along the way that kind of add up, and speak to that narrative of just trying to be conscious of what you're doing, so that yeah, you don't have to be spending huge money. And I think an example with our product specifically, because it's kind of offset by the efficiencies and savings that it brings, it's just trying to use what you've already got in your brewery. So our whole mindset is, we don't want to come in with all this new valves and new this and that you have to put in to achieve this more energy efficient and time efficient output. Just try and reuse what you've got so that you can keep doing what you're doing with the same infrastructure, but just do it better. So use what you have better. And I think that mantra, if you start applying that to everything that you have in your brewery or your operations, I think you can start to get little wins, and the little wins add up. It's just it starts with a mindset shift for sure, and it can be daunting. There's lots of good platforms out there now that can help you kind of manage and understand what you're using. One that we partner with called Zavera, they have a really good carbon management platform where you can kind of actually start to benchmark and understand, okay, we want to achieve these things. It's out of, I'd be the first, if I was doing it, to put my hand up and say, I don't know where to start. Like, that's a huge roadmap. Everyone wants to get there, but like, what is the starting point? But there's tools out there now that you can step through and at least have a pathway, and you don't have to do it all next week. Like,
Yeah.
you've got a pathway that you can set out and align with your business goals, and then just chip away at it, knowing that this is our mission. We want to get here, but we understand it's going to take time and it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I hear you on the fact that it feels like how do you want to eat the elephant, and but yet
Mm-hmm.
nothing happens if you don't start taking, those
Yeah,
steps,
you got to
right?
start
So
somewhere, right?
yeah, yeah, start somewhere, and I think that feels like sometimes the paralysis of like you want to this year you're going to do these things, and then next year you're going to do a few more,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those things. I think you hit
We,
on something though that I don't know if we talk enough about this in the industry started is I'm sure there's a lot of discussion. I know there's a lot of discussions around savings, and that's powerful.
mm-hmm.
I know that they have a lot of people talking to them about how to fill your tap room and sell more beer, right? So I feel like they are
Mm-hmm.
almost like sensory overload from this idea of like just grow your sales and that'll solve all problems. But there isn't enough discussions in my mind about how to, better lean out your operations so
Yeah,
that you're not
yeah,
always just
increase your
hoping.
margin. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a real set to be had about how, this can also affect your profits and your margins if you can, impact your costs. So on
Mm-hmm.
savings, but then also you talked about the ability, sustainability. But the third thing that you mentioned and this one hadn't occurred to me nearly as much. We talk about automation, time savings. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I hear from breweries that it's like it used to be almost like an afterthought, but sometimes they'll say like what's most important and sometimes like is yeah, that saves us a ton of time. And then
Mm-hmm.
they get into like, oh, and yes, yeah, there's dollar savings and yes, quality
Yeah,
and all this
yeah.
stuff. But they're like, we used to do it this way and now we do it this way. And it was so I think that's
Yeah.
more and more people are recognizing that. And I'm wondering, can you touch on, do you hear that after an installation or after a project, or that ability that someone can, when you talk about automation and how does time saving factor into your
I,
solution?
it definitely is a very common, yeah. Like I've heard that resonated with a lot of breweries that it's yeah the time is because if they've got more time they can do more things and they can concentrate on other things. And sometimes, you know, by nature, automation tasks are kind of repetitive and things that, you know, it your time can be totally used better for something else than something that a machine can do, right?
Yeah.
So the yeah, we definitely, because I think for us it's the time saving comes in a few different ways, but even just being able to check things on your phone, like this sounds stupid, but in a bigger brewery, like if you're walking across the floor checking something all the time versus just like pulling out your phone, like even that over the course of a day actually, like it saves time and also just the frustration of like, I gotta go and run across there and check that. And then worse, if you're off site, then you're calling like someone at the tap room to go and check something and hope they check the right thing. And so
Yeah.
I think even just the remote access side of it is a huge time saver. And then obviously, being able to automate temperature changes and things like that. There's a consistency element, but the time of not having to physically change the temperature, but then also not having to worry about where it's at because it's updating you, and it's almost like having a second set of eyes on everything.
Yep.
That's just kind of telling you like, this is where this is at. Maybe go and check this, and then you can always check on it and see where things are at.
Well, I
So I
mean
think that's a
that.
big one because you can add up like an hour a day even over the course of a month. If you put a dollar value on that time, it adds up. And then if you're doing stuff on the weekend, it's like even worse. It's eating into your own time, like your
Yeah.
personal time. So,
I hear that from, I mean, you touched on what the other part of it too, and I don't want to at all mitigate that one that I hear a ton. If I had someone list, what's your three most important things? Quality, consistency always makes the top three, right? They talk about that for the
mm-hmm.
ingredients. They talk about that. So you're
Yeah.
talking about the ability is to be able to monitor and keep that consistency and all of that ability for set points, et cetera, and to keep that quality and consistency.
Because that's also, I mean, they should be in the top three because that when you talk about ways to increase margin, like having a quality product is number one. Because
Yeah.
if you're competing against pretty you know big markets, so you need to have quality product, and then you can work down from there to find the efficiencies.
Yeah, and yet I hear, I mean, one of the challenges though is that they're trying to keep consistency with doing more with less. So ideally
Mm-hmm.
we would want six people on staff, but we're doing it with five because
Yeah,
just it's where we're at. So how do you do
and
more
then staff
with
retention
less?
becomes an issue because you're under resourced and people are
Yeah.
kind of get frustrated, and it's yeah, that's a slippery slope.
It is. It goes into, I think, just some of the challenges that a brewery that's now operating a few years starting to experience where, you've got a few employees, you've got an owner, perhaps head brewer who would be like, I would like to head out on a brew day here, but I feel like if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
here watching a few things, and they're like, but I can't always be here, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
these discussions going on of how do you do more with less, do more,
Yeah, yeah.
and there's discussions of, all of that, different ways of tackling that and trying this or trying that. And I imagine that automation ability comes into, is going to come more and more into discussion,
Mm-hmm.
of that. I've seen it happen in other industries, right? Where
For
it's
sure.
it evolved and it allowed it to come in and help you solve problems.
I think do people do a bit like sustainability though when you talk about automation, people just in their head put a price tag on it and think well that's just going to cost me more. And
Yep.
yes, there'll be an ROI, but there are that's sort of a traditional mindset. There are it's becoming more affordable to do these things because the technology is better, leaner footprint. I mean, our whole mantra of trying to do more with what you have. So just trying to reuse things that are already on site and just kind of retrofitting them to give them longevity and make them more modern. I think there's definitely ways to do it cheaper now, and have the same end result.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you go to something too. I hear that a lot with almost any size brewery. There's a little bit of a mindset where they're ready with we're just not there yet. We're not big enough, and it's
Hmm.
interesting.
Yes,
And I hear
100%.
that where they don't even, it's like, well, let's look. It might be the case, right? But they're going, well, we're at 5,000 and we're going to be when at 10,000 we'll look at that or 10, this or that.
Yeah,
This kind of we're not up that rung of the ladder and just to look at it and to see it'll either make sense or not. But I think it makes sense a lot sooner than people think.
for sure, because I think that helps you with that transition for growth. Like if you're okay, we'll only look at it then. I think if you looked at it earlier, it'll make that transition easier and potentially um, less costly because you've already implemented savings earlier on. And then we've got breweries that will have like three fermenters, and then we have some wineries that have 300 fermenters, and yes, obviously everything's scaled, but the way they're using it and the what they're getting out of it's the same result, just on a very different scale.
Yeah.
And it still makes sense with only a few fermenters because it probably comes down to the time that you're spending on that could be spent on somewhere else, because in that sort of size operation you are probably the only guy there.
Yeah.
So it's it frees up that time.
Yeah. But I think one of the other things that I talk to some breweries about, especially ones that are looking at a second location, and
Hmm.
there's this list they have usually of like, listen, we're doing this and this and this differently. Because the first time it was just like, get it in, start making beer, start filling that tap room. And it was just, sprint, run, bare basics. And now there's all these things. They're like, we just didn't put any time to investigate. Like sub-metering a chiller would
Hmm.
never have come up when you're trying to
Yeah,
open in 90 days. I mean, it's just like, should we,
yeah,
kind of thing like, should we put doors and windows on that kind of stuff and it's
yeah. That's true, right?
but yeah now but then they're like yes these are the kinds of things we want to do and I know from some experience from some of the US state level things that when you're doing a sustainability project they want to work with you and help is there any type of funding right similar to other
Hmm.
sustainability projects like solar
Yeah.
and wind and things like that you're doing it's like but they need time right? They're like, hey, if you're going to do
Hmm.
this in 6 months, one more reason to have that information. Let them work, do their process, see if that cost can come down with for help with some of that funding that comes from the state level on sustainability. They need some time too. So these aren't, I imagine decisions that are like you don't even necessarily want to say like, yes, let's do this next week anyway. So
Sure.
take
Yeah.
some due
The more you
diligence.
can, yeah, I think data-driven decisions is a big one. So like you need the data to make the decisions in the most effective way. But then also, yeah, like you were saying before, thinking that you don't need it to until you grow. I think if you put it in earlier, you're getting the return quicker, and you're going to be able to grow quicker than waiting to that point and then being in that situation where you said it's like we just need to move now and it all kind of comes to a head. And so I think the more you can prep, the more you can understand the energy and the processes that you're currently using, and how you can make them more efficient. That's going to make the return on your growth higher than just saying we need to grow by 30% to
Yeah.
hit these milestones.
I also think something too, and this just kind of, occurred to me too when you talk about doing an ROI calculator and having that ready or having that conversations and doing that research. The other thing I'm starting to see is that there is an increasing secondhand market in equipment and
Mm-hmm.
fermenters and space like that. And I'm seeing some breweries who have space and something comes on the market and they move quickly on that piece of equipment, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
that because that does get because they already thinking like, listen, we can fit it in there, we'll get it, we'll bring it in. And there is a lot of like right, we'll get it and we'll figure it out later. And
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
have some of the information and the due diligence on just the understanding of how we could bring it in, make it more energy efficient, make it more time for automation, all of that tied, rather than just spotting a secondhand chiller solution that could help in or some different fermenter solutions that yeah, let's bring those in because that seems to be a real quick sometimes buy because they're
Yeah,
the
it's kind of there, like the opportunity comes up, and
Yeah, it's
it's
right
there.
there, that thing. But now now you're answering some of the other questions of then you can have that ready. I do
Yeah.
see that with some of the breweries that I've talked to are seeing, you know, there's some growth discussion around adding a second or third location in a certain area
Hmm.
based off of a few closings, quite frankly. And so they're
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
inheriting
yeah.
some different footprints, some different equipment,
Hmm.
but they're constantly coming back to we're going to do things differently, a little more measured this time
Hmm.
than
Yes,
last
yeah.
time.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just on our product, the multi-location thing works really well because you can kind of control everything from one. So you can sit in one brewery and have visibility and control over all your locations. Yes, you're going to have people out there physically doing some things, but at least you can save a fair bit of time and yeah, not have to think about it so much when you can just jump on it from the one location.
Yeah, that is great. Well, Jessa, this is great getting a chance to talk to you about the Frigid.Cloud solution. And I'm really excited. I'm going to put out there with this information where people can connect with you at CBC in Indianapolis. It's good timing to, continue the discussion and ask more. And then we'll make sure you got your information out there too so they can reach out. But I want to end on a question to you about things that you guys are excited for 2025. So much that sometimes the industry is doom and gloom and this and that and for a product that runs on a fun beverage sometimes we're talking negative stuff but headwinds. I wanted to ask you, are there some trends coming out of the brewing space that you're excited about for 2025?
Sure. It's a good question. The one thing I was thinking about this, the one thing I really like in the brewing industry in general, it's a very collaborative industry, right? And everyone, you get that, we'll get that vibe at CBC later this month. It's like everyone's kind of helping each other out, and everyone's having a good time. And like you said, where it's a fun beverage. So what I really do enjoy is watching collaborations come together, not only for the end product, but I guess how they're kind of pushing boundaries and things. And something that I've seen recently becoming more common. We were involved in one sort of late last year or mid last year, is a collaboration on not just the beer, but how the beer is like having a second kind of goal alignment with that collaboration. So the one that we did was about like how can we make the most sustainable beer possible and still have it as a decent product.
Yeah.
And so that collaboration wasn't just two brewers, it wasn't just like brewers, it was obviously ourselves, but also we worked with a yeast company that they produce yeast that uses less energy when it's activating, and then a mushroom company, so they grow mushrooms, and all the spent kind of stuff out of that got used in the mash, and then on the day that we launched the beer, we actually had like the leftover like mushroom served in tacos, like to go with the beer, and just kind of trying to push as much as you can into that collaboration and drawing knowledge from suppliers as well, and everyone in that chain to come up with the best possible product with a
There.
value alignment attached to it. It was a really cool experience, and I'm seeing more of that now, where it's not just about let's make a beer together. It's like what else could this be?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I like the point about it's one of the things I've always liked about the industry that I've only been in a few years, but and they have adopted me into the beverage industry, the collaboration, and I think even with some of the headwinds and the challenges and increase in quantity and number, that's maintained its role of where you see people still more willing to say, "Hey, we're doing this. You want? I'll send you some information. We're doing that, or that's cool. Let's work together on it." I always say that I don't think I'd really be working as much in the industry as I do if that starts to leave, and it really hasn't. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree with you that collaboration is, and that's continuing through 25. And I really like the idea of
yeah,
the
yeah,
kind of, hey, let's challenge ourselves to see how we can make
yeah, yeah,
a really sustainable beer line, and to get a lot of partners together to kind of everyone kind of contribute
yeah,
and think
yeah,
about how you could your link in the chain, how you could do
Yeah,
that.
you'll
It's
play
pretty
your
cool.
little part in it, and yeah, and then you'll enjoy the result together.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Jessa, this was good to get a chance to talk. And again, I'll see you later this month in Indianapolis, and we
For
will get a
sure.
chance too, and we'll get the word out, and others can stop over and talk to you and get more information and talk about how they could take a look at Frigid.Cloud in their brewery.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Great. Talk to you soon
Cheers,
here.
mate.